June 20th, we got into typical mother-daughter little argument about something insignificant I don't even remember. She wanted to kick me out, and I didn't understand why that was, really. I didn't know if there was something mental going on. I knew she really missed me throughout college. Then June 20th, I left, and I never saw her again in person. Yeah. I wish I had closure to this. I don't believe she's alive anymore.
Welcome to BrainScratch. I'm John Lorden, and that was Ellie Greene talking about her mother, Angela Greene. I know this sounds like the start of an episode of Searchlight, but you heard Ellie say it herself. She doesn't believe that her mother's alive anymore. There are a lot of bizarre things going on in this story. I think we're all going to get the feeling that it's looking in one particular direction. But the real brain scratch for me is, how does this case move forward? How does this case get solved? If it is indeed a homicide, we've got some very significant stopping blocks that we're going to learn about as we go through this. The first stopping block is I'm seeing coverage of this all over YouTube. This was a really well done piece by the Kansas City Star. They've also been writing some articles on this, but you can see views are only at about 1,700. If we take a look over here, we've got another report from Fox 4 News Kansas City. Views are only just over 400 there. I've got example after example. Dateline, NBC, just over 1,500 views. I don't know what's going on with this case that it's avoiding the public embracing it. I don't know why that's happening with this particular case. I do think the timing of this case might have something to do with it, because essentially Ellie comes to understand that her mother is no longer around, and really the missing persons investigation doesn't start until February of 2020, despite the fact that Angela hasn't been seen since June of 2019. So I think the timing of this case really kicking into a missing persons investigation, coming right before the pandemic hit, has kind of washed over the importance of this case. And I'm telling you, there's all kinds. Access Hollywood did a piece on this, only 1,200 views on YouTube. So I figured I want to pull together some more people. I want to help Ellie raise exposure to this case. I want to see if we can talk about and figure out what's the thing that we can do to help move this case forward. Is it literally just trying to raise exposure and waiting for that right tip? Are there other things that we might be able to figure out on the way here? So I know this is going to feel like a searchlight, but let's jump into this case and see what we can learn. We're starting with a post from the Prairie Village Police Department, and that is Prairie Village in the state of Kansas. Here we can see they've put out a notice on February 25th of 2020. The Prairie Village Police Department is seeking assistance with locating a missing and endangered person. Prairie Village resident Angela Greene was reported missing on February 18th, 2020, but she was last seen June 19th, 2019 in the 7600 block of Tomahawk. Ms. Greene is 51 years old, described as an Asian female, 5 feet 9 inches tall, weighing 116 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, and they've attached a recent photo. Of course, they have contact information, and if you need the contact information, it's also in the description box below. And if you do have information to call in, please do. This case absolutely needs the help. Where is this taking place? Prairie Village is a city in Johnson County, Kansas, United States, and part of the Kansas City metropolitan area. As of the 2010 census, the city population was 21,447. So not the biggest city, not the biggest population that we're dealing with. And is that a factor in terms of the tips being called in? Quite possibly. But let's continue with some information. And really, we're not going to get a whole lot from NamUs here. We've got the basics. We've got her age, same date last seen, missing from Prairie Village, Kansas. We don't have a whole lot more. They're listing it as an alias or a nickname, but I believe this is actually her birth name. And I think it's Sean He. Female, 5 feet 9, 116 pounds, Asian. Really, there's nothing. Circumstances of disappearance last seen by family members on June 19th, 2019. And that's it. There's just nothing in terms of really helpful information. We've got no clothing description, no distinctive physical features that are noted, no scars or tattoos or anything like that. Transportation seems like she just disappeared, didn't have any transportation that she had taken with her, left important items behind like her driver's license, passport, some other stuff. So let's continue at the Shawnee Mission Post. Investigators say a family member reported Angela Greene, 51, missing on February 18th. Police believe she may be in danger. Asked whether foul play is suspected, Captain Ivan Washington said the investigations division had received conflicting information from people who know Greene about her whereabouts, which had them concerned for her safety. That conflicting information, we're going to spend a lot of time trying to analyze and trying to figure out, is the true story even in that? We've got, I think, 4 or 5 different stories about what's going on with around Angela's disappearance. Some of them could be related, they could be in order of events, but then we've got other stories that completely contradict that. It's really, really hard to understand, and especially because all the stories are primarily coming from one source. Let's stop over at Charlie Project and learn just a little bit more about this case. She was born in China and moved to the U.S. in 1998 when she married. From what I understand, she was working towards a television reporter career in China. She met someone who had traveled to China for work. His name's Jeffrey, and fell in love. Moved back to the U.S., and essentially we have a 90-day fiance situation that happens here. They have 90 days to get married so she can keep her status and stay in the U.S. That does happen. And then, of course, they're married for years. They have a child soon after that. I think 2 years later, they have Ellie. So we're not talking a marriage that only lasted a matter of months or something like that, and now she's gone missing. We're talking, 20 years of marriage, and she's gone missing. Angela was last seen at her home in the 7600 block of Tomahawk Road in Prairie Village, Kansas, on June 20th, 2019. Her daughter, Ellie Greene, a student at the University of Kansas, had just gotten home from having studied abroad in Italy. Ellie and Angela got into an argument, and Angela asked her to leave, so Ellie left to stay with her boyfriend's family. She stated their argument was not a serious one, although her mother had never asked her to leave the house before. She didn't hear from her mother for 3 days. Then her father, Jeffrey, sent Ellie a text saying Angela had had a mental crisis, and he had her committed to a psychiatric hospital. Let's just say that's story number 1. Angela left her purse, phone, passport, driver's license, and car behind at home. Also worth noting from other information I'm seeing, she didn't like driving long distances. She wouldn't drive alone at night. As a matter of fact, it seems like she was really a bit of a homebody. Her neighbors knew her pretty well, friendly with her neighbors. I wouldn't say knew her well. They knew of her being there. She just seemed like a very private person. But they even noticed when she disappeared. We're going to hear some information from them as well. She has also not removed any money from her bank account since she was last seen. Jeffrey has hired a lawyer and refused to speak further to the police or the media about Angela's case. Ellie stated he has not provided any more information to her about Angela's whereabouts either. So, like I said, I know this case is looking a particular way. It's looking in a certain direction. I totally admit that, but there's questions beyond that direction that really need to be figured out. And just put yourself in Ellie's shoes for a minute. She literally graduated from high school in 2018. Essentially, she does a year at college, does this trip to Italy for a month, comes home, gets in an argument with her mother, and we're going to hear some better details about what that argument was. But all of a sudden is just hearing these stories from her father. I mean, the two people that you would trust most in the world, one of them has disappeared, and you're starting to feel like the other one might not be honest with you. Really tough position for someone that's only 19 years old to go through. And on top of trying to take care of her school and her academics and keep all that going, Now she's also launching a full-blown effort to raise exposure to this case. I've seen her, I mean, on top of all the videos that I've showed you guys, she's being interviewed all over the place. She's really doing everything she can to raise exposure to this case to try to get some answers. Taking a quick stop at the map just to see where this is going on, it's really just kind of a fairly typical neighborhood area. Unfortunately, I don't see a whole lot, particularly on Tomahawk Road. I don't see a lot of camera opportunities. We've got a church, a Methodist church right up over here. Also looks like we have a temple that is here as well. We've got a couple of bus stops, so maybe you might have some cameras on all that. But a big problem with cameras in this story is we don't know that there's a missing person investigation until 8 months after she's gone missing. Any security footage at that point is probably either extremely difficult to get or has just been plainly wiped out. So unfortunately, nothing really helpful in that. And other than that, we're just looking at a straight neighborhood. And maybe that is the key to all this. Maybe there is some information in this neighborhood. I know police have taken some measures. I know they've put out some notices that they're looking for information, not just through the press, but literally hanging them on the door of the homes of this neighborhood. But who knows? Maybe it takes another video, maybe it takes a Facebook post or a Twitter post, something to get in front of the eyes of the right person that has the information. I believe that social information is going to be a very key factor in moving this case forward, because when it comes to the physical elements of the case, we have so little to look at. Jumping over to kansascity.com, this is an article I want to call out Eric Adler for doing an excellent write-up on this article. It's called Ellie's Anguish. It's actually been written kind of after a lot of the facts that we're going to go through today, but we're using it to just kind of set up the story a little bit. I really recommend that you give it a full read. Of course, I've got it in the sources down below, along with everything else that we're looking at today. But let's get a little more context for what's going on here. It wasn't long ago that her life in the Prairie Village bubble seemed nearly ideal. And we're talking about Ellie, of course. Her parents argued at times, yes, but nothing ever violent, she said. She had her father, of Russian heritage, who worked in information technology at the federal courthouse in downtown Kansas City. She had her stay-at-home mom, born Shin Hee, the second daughter of college professors outside Beijing, who married her dad in 1998. Greene was born 2 years later. In 2018, her parents watched as Greene, a pianist able to speak Spanish, Russian, and fluent Mandarin, graduated with highest honors at Shawnee Mission East High School. I mean, I had a pretty happy childhood, said Ellie, now a sophomore at the University of Kansas studying data analytics and finance. Of her mother, she said, I was her life, basically. And I've seen her say that in a couple different areas. And just to flesh that out a little more, it's just really, she was a big focal point for her mother's life. Her mother was doing everything she could to try to make sure that Ellie was doing good in school. To really make sure that she was raising her in the best way that she could so Ellie could go have a wonderful life of her own. And there is some discussion from Ellie about she doesn't know if that might have been a factor with her mother being upset with her because, you know, she had gone off to college. She had gone off on this trip. She comes home from the trip. They have this blowout. So she thinks the emotional landscape might actually kind of be colored a little bit by their relationship in terms of what a focus she was for her mother for the past 18 years. And all of a sudden that focus isn't living in the house anymore. Just over a year ago, Greene's life turned into a nightmare of confusion as it became entangled with stories told by her father, she claims, of her mother having a breakdown, being forcibly placed in a mental institution, and then dying of a stroke. Yeah, he told her a story about, first of all, that he essentially had her mother placed in a mental institution, and that while she was there, she had supposedly passed away. Later, those stories would change, Greene claimed, with her father telling her that in reality, her mother had run away. So when we get to later stories, you get this complete reversal. No, she's actually still alive, but she ran away. And something interesting is in the phrasing of that, he says that she was out partying with her friends. And Ellie doesn't really understand that either. She says her mother doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, not really the type that's known to party like that. She's the type that's known to work on her garden, help clean up around the neighborhood, to cook, but not necessarily known for taking off with her friends and partying. Greene said she has cried in despair, imagining where her mother might be. She believes her father knows more. I just want him to tell the truth, she said. Greene said she's been interviewed by police several times about the timeline of events. She had returned from studying for a month in northern Italy. Her departure for college had been hard on her mother. I think she might have been depressed or bipolar or whatever was going on, Greene said. One day, she lashed out at me. Her mom, she said, was saying she wanted her daughter to be more productive. The argument grew to the point where her mother grabbed some of her daughter's belongings and told her to leave the house. Kind of a strange conversation because her daughter had actually lined up a job. She was working a summer job at, I believe it was a local children's science museum, had just come back from Italy for this study abroad program. It's just very interesting to me that her mother will be pressing on that. And maybe it is a sign of there's some other stressor that's going on with her mother. And it's just, that's the way that it's being vented, is through that level of conversation. As a matter of fact, there's something that's been tickling in my brain ever since I've started looking into this case. And that's, I'm almost wondering if while Ellie has been moved out, if things were getting bad at home in the marriage, and when it looked like Ellie was going to be back around the house again, her mother didn't want her there to see what was going on. One thing that I've just been considering in all this as well. But so her mother tells her to leave the house. That had never happened before, Ellie said. She was like, well, you could just leave now. I thought it would blow over in a few hours, she said. She cried as she backed her Ford Fusion out of the driveway. Her boyfriend, Zach Krause of Fairway, picked her up, and that night she slept at his grandparents' home. Soon after, she would come to live full-time at his parents' home. A day after the argument, Greene's dad texted her, she said. He wanted to meet up to talk about mom. Ellie couldn't. She had plans that night. This actually says the following night, too. So another day passed. She received another text from her father, and he decided to text her a very shocking message. Her mom, he texted, had been admitted into a mental hospital. She said her father told her that he had tricked her mother to go to a grocery store parking lot where mental health workers forcibly grabbed her and took her away. He told me this 3 days after I left by text, Ellie said. I just wanted to put this to you guys because obviously this is why I talk about these types of things on this channel. I don't know for myself. I get a weird feeling hearing a story like that. I can't imagine a mental health institute deciding to capture someone in a public area like that. It seems to me that that could be risky for not just the health and safety of the person that they're supposedly grabbing to take away, but other people, like citizens. Like I can't imagine they would do something that risky in that manner. I think a real system might be more along the lines of, tell her that you're taking her to dinner and then drive her to here, to the actual facility. Or something along those lines. Quite honestly, I don't know. So I wanted to put that out there for you guys. Please, in the comments below, let me know what you think about this aspect of the story. Is there any possible reality to this? I mean, honestly, we know that later he's saying, no, she ran off with some friends. So it seems to me like he's practically admitting that this part of the story isn't true. But right off the bat, the way that he's describing this, I don't know. And we're going to see his reasoning for it is kind of even harder to understand when we get to this text message down below. Let's see here. So Ellie asked, how did you take her away? And he replied, we met the mental health people in the store parking lot, and it was a struggle. Better than trying to pry her out of the house. And she always looks good going out, so she did not have the embarrassment of house clothes or untidy house. I don't know. The justifications for this just don't seem very strong to me. Ellie said that she asked where her mother was placed, but her father refused to tell her other than down south somewhere. I asked plenty of times. Every single time he shut me down, Ellie said. But she also trusted her father. She said that he told her he didn't want her to know because he didn't want her to visit her mother until her mother was doing better. And it seemed reasonable. She said he also instructed his daughter not to alert Angela Greene's extended family. I will respect that, said Ellie, raised to be a dutiful daughter. 3.5 weeks passed. July 16th, 2019. Greene said that her dad contacted her again. She said he asked to see her in person. It was important. They met at the Krause's home, her boyfriend's home, late at night. He pulls up to Zach's house. He says, Angela died of a stroke, Ellie said. I remember the world going blurry. I fell to my knees on the driveway. I couldn't even cry. I had no words. We went over and told Zach, and then he left. I was sitting there in disbelief, and he just left. It was horrible. Losing my mom has always been my worst nightmare. The next day, the Krauses invited Jeff Greene to their home so he wouldn't be alone. They had not met him before. And I just want to call out what an amazing family. And I'm not even going to get into all the details here, but essentially, they were there for giving Ellie a place to stay. But on top of that, the story that they heard and they were assuming was true was Jeff was now grieving the loss of a wife. And not just this time, I'm hearing of several other times where they basically opened their doors and invited him into their home for holidays and things of that nature. It seems like with all the best of intentions. He seemed in shock. Zach's mother, Sarah, is saying about the time that they invited him in so he wouldn't be alone. He seemed very quiet and didn't talk a lot, and his eyes were down, said Zach's mother. She asked if there would be a funeral. No. A memorial. No. She offered to pen an obituary. Krause said he never followed up. Ellie said none was written. Ellie did ask, will an autopsy be performed? He didn't answer, she said. I knew my mom wanted her ashes sent back to China. It's a cultural thing, Ellie said. Once again, she said her father requested that she say nothing to her mother's side of the family about her death. Every time Ellie brought up a memorial or funeral arrangements, he just put it off. People are like, did you not ask questions for the next 8 months, Ellie said. Of course I asked questions, like every single weekend, or whenever I went over there or saw him. I would ask questions, but he would not answer anything about mom. And once again, I just want to keep framing this in the context of this is a 19-year-old girl. I mean, I just trying to deal with something like this at that age, the rocks of the foundation of everything you believe in is being shattered to the core. And are you going to try to hold on to some of that if you can? The one person that's still there and believe in them? I almost have this feeling that I want to send this video to Sarah Turney just to get some of her insight on this as well. I know this is emotionally, this is probably the toughest type of situation that you can go through. And to go through it at such an age when you don't really have all of your skills in dealing with something like this. I mean, I don't know if you ever get a great tool set for that. But at least with some experience, you can kind of look back and say, okay, well, I've been through something like this. I've been through something like this. And can I meld together some way to get through what I'm going through now? When you're 19, you just don't have that. And after what I'm sure is months of feeling odd about everything that's going on, Ellie finally decides that she's going to break the promise to her father. She speaks directly to her aunt, Catherine Gore, her mom's sister. I couldn't even say anything for like a minute. I was crying the whole time, she said. I finally got the words out. My mom has died. Her aunt naturally thought that it had just happened. No, Ellie told them. This happened back in July. The family was shocked. So yeah, the aunt hearing this is like, oh, we've got to get on a plane. We've got to get out there. We've got to get the arrangements going. And Ellie at that point is just saying, no, you don't understand. This is months ago that this happened. Thankfully, the start of this dialogue starts some very important questions and requests from Angela's family. And they're asking Ellie to kind of check into things a little bit in a very reasonable way. I think we asked her, does she have a death certificate? Gore recalled. We thought it was so strange that she had allegedly died 8 months ago and there was absolutely no trace of it. We thought the only way we could get some proof is to see a death certificate and see what her cause of death was and what day it was. So Ellie, she decides to skip classes for a day. She travels to Topeka, asks for a death certificate, and cannot find one. On top of that, I know that eventually she talks to the police about this. They also do a nationwide search for a death certificate, and they cannot find a death certificate for Angela. Ellie saw her father soon after and confronted him. I asked him, "Where did Mom die?" He said Kansas, she recalled. She responded to him, "No, she didn't." She said that she had just been to Topeka and discovered that no death certificate existed. Her father, she said, told her that he had to go home and look up the location of her death. So his wife of 20 years, he can't remember what state she actually died in. I was like, okay, he's lying, Ellie said, and asked him, where are the ashes? At home, she was told. I asked him what hospital and what doctor. He literally stared into space, she said. She filed a missing persons report, and thankfully she did, because we're already behind the ball in terms of how much time has passed here. But we need investigators to get all over this case, and we're going to see that that certainly does happen. After the police got involved, Ellie said her father changed the story. His wife had possibly run off with a friend. Over at the Shawnee Mission Post, let's get a little more insight into what type of person Angela, I want to say was, but I have to say is. We certainly don't know for a fact that she is no longer with us, though it does strongly seem that way. Angela wasn't the type of person to have a close group of friends, but was social with neighbors, bringing them flowers or baked goods. She would talk to me when we were both outside about our kids and schools and neighbors. She was such a sweet lady, said her next door neighbor, Nicole Walton. Walton didn't talk to Jeffrey as frequently. He was not as open as Angela, she added. Others found it easiest to connect with Jeffrey about his passion for vintage cars, saying he was fairly quiet outside of this. Ellie describes her father as mellow and the more patient parent of the two. He was born on the East Coast and worked as an auto mechanic and salesperson before getting into IT. Jeffrey retired from his job at the courthouse in December. A colleague from the courthouse declined to answer questions about Jeffrey and said other staff similarly did not have comments. I don't know if it was time for him to retire. I don't know if that had been pre-planned, or I don't know if it wasn't planned. And, 6 months after his wife disappears, he decides, okay, I'm done working here. Growing up, Ellie said that she saw her parents fight, but nothing to the extent of somebody doing something really potentially harmful to each other. A little bit more information down here. For the past 13 months, Ellie's relationship with both parents has been in limbo. She doesn't know what to believe about her mom's disappearance. How can she? I mean, first she's being told, yeah, I took your mom to the store so she could be captured by mental health employees and taken away to a hospital somewhere that I'm not going to tell you. And then a few weeks after that, oh, by the way, yeah, she passed away in the hospital. But I can't remember what state. Yeah, I've got her ashes. They're at home. And he even sends a text message to her of an urn that's in the home as well. As for her dad, much of their communication has halted. She texts him about rent once a month, but mostly she asks him about her mom. I've asked again and again, have you heard from Mom? Ellie said. And his answer is no. And then he asks me, have you heard from Mom? And I'm like, well, if she were dead, I would not hear from her. Is that correct? That's not how people work, right? And he goes, yes, you can think of it that way. Once again, if you've listened to Voices for Justice at all, and you've heard some of the conversations between Sarah Turney and her father, this type of language, I'm telling you, it's almost like this is a copy of a conversation that I've heard from that podcast. This kind of, I'm going to ask about this, you're going to answer a question that way, and I'm going to have this kind of hard to understand sideways response to that. Yes, you can think of it that way. What does that mean? I feel so bad for Ellie in this. So earlier I had said that I think it's going to be social information that really helps progress this case. One of the things I'm feeling hopeful about is it seems like we've got a pretty observant neighborhood where she was living. Let's learn more here at fox4kc.com. First of all, the police department's being very clear. They're not even going to comment on the fact that she wasn't reported missing until February 18th, 2020. But the neighbors say that Angela was devoted to her daughter and to her neighborhood. When she wasn't out gardening in her own yard, she tended to the neighborhood islands, helping to keep them clear of trash or debris. Quote, when the summer came up and I didn't see Angela, and I asked other neighbors, she thought maybe she had gone to China, Stephen Harville said. They reached out to the couple's daughter away at college, who responded via text to say her dad told her that her mom died of a stroke in July, but she thinks that might not be the case, Harville said. Fox 4 went to the Greenes' home to try to find out more. An SUV pulled into the garage and the driver closed the door immediately. No one answered a knock on the door. I think we know who that was. Continuing over at KSHB, she's not the kind of person who would take off with somebody else, Stephen Harville, same neighbor, told 41 Action News. Angela did not do a lot of things on her own, he said. So life went on until last week when police showed up to Greene's home to talk to her husband. Police went into the house through the garage with him, stayed inside quite a while, and then they came out the front door, Harville said. They went down where you're parked. He's talking to the people that he's talking to that I think are standing on the street. They talked for quite a while, came back, knock on the door, and went in for another hour. So it sounds like the investigators essentially had a little conference back at their car and then decided they had more questions for him and went back in. We're looking for help from the community, said Captain Ivan Washington of the Prairie Village Police Department. Washington says he has not come across a case like this in his 19 years with the department. And quite honestly, even though we look at very strange and bizarre occurrences on this channel, I haven't quite hit a case like this either. Something that looks so strongly in one direction and is just missing one solid piece of information to push it into that next phase of being a criminal investigation. But this thing is kind of stuck in terms of being a missing persons case. Can the investigators break through that? Let's continue with some more information on what they tried to do. The investigation into where a missing 51-year-old woman has now entered its second week. Police aren't saying much about the investigation, so Fox 4 spoke to a retired FBI special agent. Quote, the first thought is it's highly suspicious, Michael Tabman said. The police are now left with a very difficult situation. 8 months later, people aren't going to remember. Did I see her on this day or that day? Tabman said. They are not going to remember little things that she said that might have been important, but they have forgotten about 8 months later. And any physical evidence of a crime has most likely disappeared with time. Another quote of his, we always know the husband is going to be a suspect. Again, not conclusive. It doesn't mean he did it, but they always look at the husbands or boyfriends first. But now we have a husband who's not giving credible information. Police have to work backward, checking cell phone records, bank records, talking to family, friends, and neighbors. Orange door hangers were left behind by detectives canvassing the neighborhood on Thursday. On the surface, it looks like a homicide, Tabman said. But this wouldn't be the first time in my life or my career that we've seen this where a woman just leaves to flee her husband. Tabman said if police don't get significant evidence of a crime, this case could go cold quickly and drag on for years. Over at KCTV5, police serve search warrants, and this is as of March 11th, 2020. Authorities arrived about 7 a.m. Wednesday in the 7600 block of Tomahawk Road in Prairie Village, where Angela Greene has lived with her husband for nearly 20 years. Police had crime scene tape lined around the entire home and streets blocked off. Investigators were seen carrying rakes, gloves, buckets, and evidence bags to the backyard. It hasn't been said what they're doing in there, but the tent itself suggests they're preserving that area. It's referring to, I've seen some video footage of it, but they set up a blue tent in the backyard area to Does that really mean that they found something back there? Possibly. Maybe they saw some disturbance in the ground and they thought they have to do more work on that. And they're trying to make sure that it's outside of the view of media. They also, which I really haven't seen before, it looks like they used almost like tinfoil to cover up all the windows into the home as they were searching it. I don't know if that's some type of evidence collection technique or if that's just for, once again, dealing with the media. But we can see, they're taking rakes, they're taking buckets. They're certainly interested in looking through the backyard. I don't know if they removed electronics from the home. I would like to think that there was some type of forensics ran on the computers in the house. If this is something that might have had some type of forethought or planning, there might be some search history, but you're talking about an IT guy. Does he know about, clearing out his cache, his internet history? Is he that detailed in terms of how he would go about this? It's very possible. But they didn't only serve one search warrant, they actually served two. Also, another search warrant is served at Marionyx Marble and Granite in, I believe it's Olathe. Authorities were searching in that area from 7 a.m. and left around 3:30 p.m. Some searched by boat using equipment to see if they could spot anything in the water, and then several investigators could be seen walking side by side searching elsewhere on that property. What's interesting about this property is reportedly we know that Jeffrey is into vehicles. I believe he was storing a few vehicles at this spot. So I'm sure they wanted to check out those vehicles. And then also, since he had access to this area, it seems like it was worth searching. You can see there's got quite a bit of water back here. But it looks like dive teams went in there, and of course, we're not seeing any announcements of anything significant being found. That doesn't mean that no evidence is found, but if a body had been found or remains had been found, I'm almost positive that would have been reported. Another article at fox4kc.com. The Olathe property searched Wednesday is large and includes clearings, a wooded area, and a pond. It stretches behind a residential area where people were surprised at what they saw going on. Misty Grady, whose home backs up to the pond on the search site, said, "I saw them back up and put a boat in the water. Then people started coming by on foot, searching the area on foot. There was quite a few people back there, I'd say 20 to 30 at one point." Grady, who has young children, was concerned about the police activity behind her house and asked one of the officers what was going on. She said, "They're just looking for the potential body that was maybe placed back here to hide it," Grady said. And it was an older gentleman that they're looking for that possibly did it, that had connection to this land. I think we know who they're talking about. The landowner leases warehouse and office space to several companies, including Marionyx Marble and Granite and K&M Services, as well as trucking companies, among others. And of course, we know one of those others would be Jeffrey for his vehicles. In addition to Prairie Village Police, the following agencies assisted with the execution of the search warrants: Johnson County Crime Lab, Joe Coe Medical Examiner's Office, the Olathe Police Department, the Overland Park Police Department, the Leawood Police Department, and the Johnson County District Attorney's Office. So you can tell this was a big effort. I really think that they were figuring that they were going to find something substantial. Prairie Village Police spokesman Captain Ivan Washington confirmed the Tomahawk address they searched is the home where Greene and her husband live. He said it is the first time police have been inside the home and that it is a fact-finding mission to help them find Greene. At this point, we're still working a missing persons investigation, Washington said. Nothing says this will not change to a criminal investigation, but as we sit here right now, it's a missing persons. Washington reiterated that they received conflicting statements leading police to believe Greene is endangered. Some questions are simple to answer, and when they start to get conflicting statements, it's concerning to us, Washington said. I think Washington is making a good point here, but it also makes me wonder, shouldn't conflicting statements of this particular nature be enough to push this into a criminal investigation? We know that there are no body homicides. We know that essentially some people get prosecuted. And as a matter of fact, we have one coming up on Case Cracked on Monday, a case where they didn't know where the body was. They prosecuted and got their conviction. We know that that happens. So in those cases where you don't have the immediate proof of, well, we found this body and then we know what happened to it because of forensic information, How do those cases progress to a point of being criminal investigations? These stories are conflicting in such a way that I believe these statements alone should be enough to kind of push things. And obviously, they were enough for the search warrants. And you would hope that the search warrants would then give you that next level of information where they could take it from there and then say, okay, we found an area of the rug that had obviously been cleaned. We could tell there's a large blood stain there. Let's push this thing into a criminal investigation. That doesn't seem to happen, at least yet with this case. And that's another thing we have to keep in mind is this case has really only started from February of this year. So we're still within the first year of the investigation. It could be that some things are found that haven't been made public yet because there's still aspects of those being investigated. And it could be that Jeffrey's still going to see charges come his way, despite the fact that Angela may not be found. So there's a lot of bizarre things going on here, but it really just has me wondering about at what point can you not say, hey, look, we know this person's lying. We've got to push this into a criminal investigation. And even for the story he's telling us, she took off with some friends. Okay, well, what does that look like? What did she leave in the middle of the day? Then how do you know she took off with friends? Did she leave you a letter or a note? Let us review that. Did you see her drive off? What type of vehicle was it? How did she know these people? How did she regularly communicate with them? Do you have phone records to show that she has been talking to someone? Or just let us review the phone records and go through that. In my mind, there's got to be some information that backs one of those stories, or the stories themselves should be enough to say, okay, we know this guy is lying to us. Does that prove he did anything? No, not necessarily. But should it be enough of a criteria to shift this into being looked at deeper? Yes. It's weird to just sit on, well, this is still just a missing persons investigation. I get that. But I know that those no-body homicides, and I know there's not a ton of them, but there are some examples of that happening. Those are also missing persons investigations, but somehow they're getting charges in those as well. Over at IB Times, there's just one comment from this article. The search, which followed early efforts to find Greene, was not as fruitful as Washington said investigators hoped. One thing that did come out of this is they found that urn that he had sent a picture to Ellie of, and the urn was empty. It was also clear to them that it had been recently purchased. Once again, shouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't that be enough to push this forward? Well, what if Jeffrey had a story about that as well? So rewind a little bit to Ellie going to the police department, getting the missing persons report filled out. Her dad actually called while she was sitting at a small round table with two detectives. She put him on speaker and hit record. Jeff admitted that he had made up the story about Angela being forcibly taken to a mental hospital. I didn't want you to think that she had run off with some stranger to do something, he said. The truth is that she kind of disappeared. After Angela went missing, he said, he got a call from someone saying she had been admitted to a hospital. This story is like, this is wacky. All right, you're saying, nope, she didn't get admitted to a hospital. I lied about all that. But I got a phone call a little later, and that guy says, yeah, she was admitted to a hospital. Just, what? And then a few weeks after that, he got a call and had been told that she had died. So he's essentially now saying the story that he had told his daughter before, where he was the kind of expert of knowledge of that story. Now he's saying, no, that didn't really happen. She ran off with someone, but then someone called me and told me that story that I told you had actually happened. It's so bizarre. He said he did not take notes about what hospital it was because he was busy at work. Someone calls you, I don't care what type of work you're doing, about your missing wife and says that they're in a mental hospital, and you're not going to stop and find a piece of paper and write it down, or just pay attention. Like, it just, none of this is really holding up for me. I got a call that someone's going to come by the house and pick up money for the cremation, Jeff told Ellie. I got an urn, and they dropped the urn back by, and it was all done by phone. He looked in the urn later and saw that it was empty. So what does this story do for him? he's trying to save face with his daughter. So he's basically saying, those things that I told you, yeah, they're kind of a lie, but not really, because someone else told me that, and then that's what I told you. So it's, yeah, I forgot to tell you this part in the middle, that there was someone else that was feeding me this info. But everything with you, I was being honest with you. But what else does this story do? He's now made a reason why if they go looking for records for the purchase of an urn, they're going to find that he bought the urn. And he just didn't know it was empty. Crazy. After a few minutes, Ellie asked a question that had been getting louder and louder in her head for weeks. Did you hurt Mom? No, he replied. Oh, I don't know. I don't know how she does it, really. I would be so frustrated. And essentially, it's so clear to me that as this is going to progress, like I said, we're only really in year 1 of the investigation. Jeff is very likely going to lose his daughter. What hurts me more than that is him not thinking of that consideration from Ellie's point of view, who has already lost her mother and is now also going to lose her father. If he had come around and, I don't know if manned up is the right term, whatever the term is, came forward and was honest about, yes, something bad happened, I lost control, this is what happened, and faced it, went to court, got convicted, put himself in jail, there's still an end road for that where his daughter might not run away from him. There's still an end game at that point of, this is the person I always believed in. Yes, he did something terrible. He's paying the price for that. He's being honest about it. He's not hurting me and my mother's family by denying this and running away from this. There's a road through with that approach. The approach that he's taken right now, once again, listen to Voices for Justice. He's going to lose her, and he's going to lose her forever, and he's never going to have that possible end game of getting her back. Maybe it's not that important to him, but that, to think about that, really breaks my heart too. I felt it 3 days after I left the house. So here's another occurrence, very, very bizarre. 3 days after she had the fight with her mom, she actually went back to the house, and her dad was there and said, "Mom's gone. The door's open. You're welcome to stay here." I had an eerie feeling about the house, Ellie said. She says she wishes she didn't leave things with her mother the way that she did. Of course, I wished I had hugged her, said I love you, said something to her, Ellie said. And that's another terrible aspect of this, to think about having such a tough moment with your mother, and then that's possibly the last moment that you're ever going to have with her. One other reason why I brought this fact up right now about him inviting Ellie back into the house, I don't know if whatever happened at the house. I would believe if there was some risk of discovery, if, for example, Angela had been kept in the house, or if there was a big fight in the house and there was still some signs of that, I don't think 3 days later you're going to get Jeff saying, "Yeah, you can stay. Come on in." I just don't see that. So I'm wondering about the location of what's going on here. It's interesting because, I'm always looking at the statements people are making and trying to figure out, are any parts of those true? Maybe there's something about this. I took her to the store where the guys were going to capture her and take her to the mental health facility. Maybe there's some aspect of that. Maybe that's a story that he actually ran by her. "Hey, let's go shopping. We have to go shopping tonight." Got her in the car, took her somewhere, and then that's where something happened. It would be, I don't know. I think it would be very gutsy to invite your daughter back into the home within a matter of days of when you possibly did something to her mother. Another comment from Captain Washington. Thank you, fox4kc.com. "We hope to bring Angela Greene home. Washington said the investigation is still active, but they need tips from the public." And this is where I need your help. Of course, we've got the contact information down below, including a tips line where you can remain anonymous, but we need to get this video in front of the right people so they know to act on this to help Ellie out. So please share this video with any friends that you might have in Kansas. And I'd say Missouri. There's something that we didn't touch on. They live pretty close to the border. And of course, with all these missing persons cases, I'm always looking at water sources. There's kind of a river that's a little bit close to where their house is, but there are more significant water sources over in Missouri. And I'm always wondering about people that commit crimes when they live close to a state border like that. If they're very aware of how law enforcement works and how kind of regionalized it can be, there might be some aspect to them actually jumping that border to hide something. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we actually hear that there is a discovery made in Missouri that's related to this case. But for the tips, Captain Washington is saying that could be anything. That could be the slightest thing you might think is insignificant. If you know where Mrs. Greene is, that would be ideal, but any information would be beneficial, and it would give us an opportunity to track down those leads. Ellie says, I miss her so much. I just want to know what really happened, and I want her to know I love her a lot. So, not a lot of the articles actually feature pictures of Jeff. This is, of course, an old photo. This is him with Ellie, I believe, when she's born. But here is a more recent photo of what he looks like now. And I'm posting this not because I'm trying to out the guy or anything like that. Of course, we have to, hey, innocent until proven guilty. I've got that. But we've got a lot of conflicting stories being told by him. We're trying to jog the memory of someone that might have seen something. And for that, I think you have to know what he looks like. And that's why I wanted to be sure to post a picture of him here as well. It has been posted. Let me just be clear. There have been a few other articles that have posted photos from him. There's been numerous video segments. So it's not, I'm not, like outing him in terms of private information or anything like that, which is a big no-no for YouTube. Has been posted previously, newsworthy sources, but this is what he looks like. If you live in this area, if you've seen someone that looks like this, that might have been doing something strange, that's the type of information that I believe Captain Washington wants you to call in using those numbers down below. Also wanted to call out Crimelines. It's the first time I have listened to this podcast. They had an episode on Angela Greene, very well researched, very well read. Really enjoyed the coverage on that. So I'm going to have a link to that down below as well. And there is a Web Sleuths thread where you can join in on the conversation. But of course, we've got the comments down below, and that's where I'm going to ask for your thoughts and theories. And really, I want to put it to you guys. How does this case progress? How does this thing move forward? Obviously, one thing we've touched on, social information. Outside of that, obviously, if there is a discovery of remains, and in many cases, that could take some time. You never know. It could be a hunter, could be someone walking a dog. It's usually kind of a randomized chance, especially with a case like this, because we don't really have an area to look in particular. It's not like she was last seen at a particular public park or something like that where you can actually get search efforts going. We really don't have that information. That does raise an interesting investigative point, though. I'd be really interested in seeing the cell phone location information for Jeff around that day and the following few days, just to see if he goes anywhere kind of out of the spec for norm for him. But once again, we've got to keep in mind this is an IT guy. Is he aware of being tracked like that? Would he have left his cell phone at home if he was making a kind of an oddball trip like that? It's quite possible as well. So where else, guys? Where else do we look to help with this case? And once again, just another reminder, let's please try to help Ellie. You guys saw, I can't believe this thing isn't catching the attention that it really deserves in terms of YouTube. So please help me with that. Share this video. Let's get this thing out there and get it in front of the right people, and hopefully get those tips called in that are going to help Ellie find the truth so that she can grapple and deal with that in whatever way she needs to, but that so she can also kind of move through this. I can't imagine it's easy trying to start your life and having such a significant stopping point like this that's going to take so much attention and focus of yours. It's really tough on a lot of different levels. So before I end today's video, I want to thank a few new patrons. Thank you, Jenny G, and thank you, Haley. Also a big thank you to Lisa Lambert and Spicy Amy E for increasing your pledges. you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com, where you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, or buy merchandise. All of it helps keep me here trying to help people in these very, very tough situations, just like Ellie, and always doing it with limited commercials. I can't do that without your support. So thank you guys so much. On Monday, a brand new episode of 3 Men and a Mystery begins. Be sure to follow that over on the 3 Men and a Mystery YouTube channel. Back here, we'll have a new episode of Case Cracked on the Lord and Arts channel.